number of years ago, we got involved in looking at the accessibility of polling sites on election days. And New York City was proudly saying that almost all of its voting sites were accessible. But when we brought together volunteer teams of people with disabilities to go and assess the sites, we found something quite shocking. We found that more than half of the sites, in fact, a real majority, were inaccessible for one reason or another. Frequently, they were inaccessible because ramps were poorly constructed or were obstructed by debris so that they were impassable. There were so many issues that with good scrutiny, the day before Election Day or the morning of Election Day, those problems could have been solved. Often problems were related to good signage or lack thereof. We simply felt that New York City had to do better. So we launched our own civil rights campaign. And a civil rights campaign to us means a campaign where you are educating the public as well as policymakers and building an understanding of why the rights you're talking about are really about basic human dignity for everybody.
In a county the size of Kings County, which is where Brooklyn is, there are over 2 million people and perhaps hundreds of election districts. To have one specially designated accessible polling site for the whole borough, I see that as a serious logistical problem. For people that were going to vote at this specially designated site that lived all the way on the other side, the process would turn into easily a 5 to 6 hour journey through either paratransit or mass transit to go from a place like Canarsie or Bensonhurst or Marine Park.
In the beginning of the 1900s, you had waves of immigration, of Asian Americans, of Eastern Europeans, of Italians, of folks who were different religions and ethnicities than the folks who were here, which were primarily white, Anglo-Saxon Protestants, that stereotype. And that's when you began to have all of these barriers to registration put in place. So the barriers started in the early 1900s. And those barriers are primarily put in place to disenfranchise and target particular groups, but their impact has gone beyond that. Their impact, that registration is not automatic, people have to go out and find registration forms. And that's also a way which it definitely impacts on voters with disabilities as well.
With the introduction of electronic voting, it has really helped individuals with disabilities because it has allowed them to vote privately and independently. At the same time, it's raised questions regarding the security and accuracy of the ballots. I'm not a security expert. However, I think that security and accessibility can be compatible. It takes time, it takes money, and it takes laws requiring specifically that whatever standard we're going to use to increase accuracy, to increase the integrity of our elections are also accessible. One thing we cannot do is turn back, and we've made great strides with HAVA, and we can't just turn the corner and say we're going to go to, for instance, a paper trail that's not accessible. That does not make our elections more secure if a big lot of our ballots aren't verifiable by certain individuals. So, but I do think that verification can be made accessible. Like I said, though, it's going to take time, money, and the laws requiring it. And that's why manufacturers will build it if there's a law requiring it.
I think, first of all, that persons with disabilities are just as interested in a secure election process and an election process with integrity as able voters are. I think that we have the technological potential in this country, certainly, to develop a voting system which is both secure and accessible. The consequence of which is that the states did not get the guidance from the federal government that they required in order to make what is admittedly a big change in voting systems from what we had before towards something that was secure and accessible today and in the future.
What's important to us are the accessibility features of any machine. What we care about is no matter what manufacturer and what style of machine is selected, that it is as broadly usable by people with as many different kinds of disabilities as possible. There are many, many, many groups weighing in on the privacy and security of the ballot, and we agree that that is a really crucial issue. However, we have a really singular mission, and one that no other community can carry for us, and one that we must give voice to on our own, and that is our access as people with disabilities to voting, just like everybody else.